Hi team, I wanted to give you an overview of the CMPP and Giving Forward and the Herald Times and how everything fits together from the user story perspective of the reader. Because I think from that you'll be able to piece together, or together we'll be able to piece together all the elements of what we need to build, break them down into smaller JIRA stories so that I can spread them out among you, or you guys can spread them out amongst yourselves and get them done in the most efficient way. So the reason I'm starting on another website, this is an old website of mine called Power Profiles, as a publisher website, is because for the first few months we're going to get most of our traffic from donated banner inventory. So the click URL for this piece of this banner leads us through to Herald Times, and I copied the URL and I put it into a Google Doc so that you can see the format of it. However, we're not going to be using it directly the same way I am here. We're going to have an intermediate URL for our click filter, our bot filter. We want to make sure only humans get to the Herald Times site, because non-humans arriving at our site makes us look bad, because advertisers have sniffing technology on their side. They'll be able to tell that ads are running on Herald Times that are not against humans, and they'll cancel their contracts. Google will kick us out of the AdX and we won't be able to make any money. So we really need to make sure we filter out as many of the non-humans as possible, and we're going to use Google's own technology, reCAPTCHA, to do that. And there'll be an in-between URL where this entire thing becomes a query parameter on the other URL, where if the reCAPTCHA score is human enough, we'll go ahead and pass them through to this URL. If not, we'll send them somewhere else. Perhaps we'll create a page with no advertising or something like that that we can use. Or we'll send them through a reCAPTCHA 2.x to have them really prove they're human if, for example, they manage to get there. But we probably won't send them through to Herald Times. The reason I put this up here, though, is because the query parameter that's at the end of the Herald Times URL here is a UTM parameter, right? UTM is Urchin Tracking Module. It's the old Google Analytics company that Google bought before it was Google Analytics, was Urchin Tracking Module. It tells us the source. We give the URL to the source, and we tell them to put, we put for them their URL in there so we can see where the click came from. We know it's a display, we know it's a public service announcement ad, PSA, and most importantly, the two elements here are the cause name for the reader's choice until they register and override it, and the member ID of the entity that sent the click. In this case, we're going to give a Giving Forward member ID to the publisher. I just put something in there temporarily as a placeholder. But it's key for us to know that the reader's choice temporarily is set as a result of the UTM parameter. So when the page actually loads, we're going to want to reflect that in the user experience. So let's go ahead and click through on the banner and head over to Herald Times to read an article. When we do that, and we end up on the Herald Times, here's what's missing from the CMPP that we haven't built yet. First of all, I wrote this, right? And it would be important for the reader to understand which cause I'm supporting, right? So if I'm supporting Save the Children, which would probably be a cause I would support since I know the people that work there pretty well and it's a great cause, we would want Save the Children's name and logo to appear somewhere near my name, right? And that's part of that plugin that is going to sit within WordPress and allow me to select a cause from a drop-down menu, a curated set of causes, and then that will be inserted in here, perhaps using an iframe, or there's a bunch of other ways we could do it. But the point is, there's got to have a little slot in here that in desktop mode, tablet mode, and in smartphone mode, there's always a way for a person to tell near my name and near the title of the cause what cause I'm supporting. We want to make better use of this top bar too, because this top bar is already in the theme, and there's a lot of top bars in a lot of other publishers, and they're used really effectively. So in our case, that top bar will not only tell us another place to put the cause of the writer's choice up here in the top bar, so that they know that this article is supporting this cause, right? We could put the cause name that is being supported as a result of the writer up there, and it could say creator's cause equals, and then it could be the temporary or the logged in state cause of the registered giving forward member, right? So in this case, they're not registered or logged in yet, right? But the UTM says ASPCA, so we'd want to have the ASPCA up there either in a logo form or written form or both. We'd want to have point totals. We'd want to have point totals for the day, and we'd want to have total points that this member has generated. Obviously, in the case of a new member, where all we have is a cookie that includes a newly placed parameter of the ASPCA being their reader's choice cause, that temporary sort of null user is supporting the ASPCA, but only as a result of there being a UTM code passed into the landing page URL. We'll want to use this top bar for the status of whether they're logged in or not. I'll show you some great examples of other publishers using that. But before we leave the Herald Times landing page, the other thing I wanted to bring to your attention is, yes, we'll need a top bar that includes the ability to see a mini dashboard when you click on the individual's avatar. But we also need, and we'll need a way for the writer's cause to be reflected here. But there's an on-click command that's going to be using information out of the session cookie to append onto the share URLs UTM parameters as well, right? So let's say that this is being read by my daughter Kira, and while I like Save the Children, she happens to arrive as a result of a banner that's supporting the ASPCA. So temporarily, before she registers, her cause is the ASPCA. So any sharing behavior that she does continues to support the ASPCA even if she doesn't register. If she registers and picks the Humane Society, right, we want to pass the Humane Society parameter along with the share behavior, right? So her cookie now reflects the fact that she likes the Humane Society because she registers, and on click, it appends onto her sharing URL, Humane Society, and her member ID, not the member ID of the previous referrer, which was the banner. So that data sharing and that passing of that data through is really key, because our JavaScript, which is on this page, is going to use the information out of the registration cookie, if there is one, or temporary registration cookie if we don't have the PII yet, the person hasn't actually registered yet. And it's going to pull information out of the HTML so that it understands who the writer was and the writer's cause choices and the writer's member ID, their giving forward member ID. So let's take a look at some other publishers and see how they're handling their top bars. So here's an article in the New York Post is actually about me and about my attempt to buy Gawker and how Keith Kelly thought that I was going to have another chance to get at it when Brian Goldberg decided to lay off the last round of editors. Of course, it wasn't really a true story. He basically made it up, decided it was newsworthy enough to publish it. I took the PR, what the heck. But what's interesting about this is, in our case, giving forward is like the umbrella domain, right? There's going to be Herald Times, there's going to be Hollywood Herald, there's going to be brainrot.org, there's going to be a bunch of others. And we'll want a common login status for all of them. Now what's interesting about the New York Post is I happen to have a WordPress.com login that I used for some purpose, I don't remember why, but what was interesting is because that cookie was set on my browser, when I got to the New York Post, WordPress.com, which is a sort of commercial publishing platform, went ahead and added this top bar, including my little avatar here, right? And what's interesting about the little avatar here is, again, New York Post doesn't know who I am. They're asking me to sign up. But obviously the cookie from WordPress.com knows who I am. And if I click on this, it's going to show me my account details on WordPress.com, which they must have a relationship with the New York Post because maybe they power the New York Post website. But you know, in this case, there's a separate sign up if I want to sign up for the New York Post, and register for the New York Post. So similar looking top bar to what we had in our theme design, but let's take a look at a bunch of other sites. So the New York Times, they put their account pull down in a similar place. They leave themselves a whole lot of room for advertiser monetization at the top in the desktop environment. And then it just says account. It doesn't say a whole lot more. If I click on it, it doesn't give me a whole lot of information except, that I'm on a basic subscription and the ability for me to dig in. So that's not particularly earth-shattering at all. Washington Post, what's cool about that is that when I'm logged into the Washington Post, which I logged in with Google, but there's something really cool the Washington Post did. Not only is their pull down a little bit cooler in the way it interacts with the page, but also when we go to account settings, what's really cool, and I think we should try to replicate for ourselves, whoops, I'll have to sign in. Now, this is actually fine. So if I sign in with Google, right, it gives me a choice of how to sign in. But let's see if I sign in with Google and I use my Gmail, which is the one that they have on account with me, it's going to sign me in. But what's interesting about this is I also was given the option to connect my Amazon and my Facebook identities to my Washington Post login. Why is that important? Why is it important for us as Giving Forward? It's because even though some people may prefer to log in and out using Google, we'd like to get them to also authenticate using Facebook because eventually we may want to build leaderboards that allow you to compete with your friends, your social graph, right? And see who's getting more points and really gamify the hell out of it. Not in the first version. We got plenty of other stuff to do first. But I thought they did a really good job in the Washington Post of allowing you to connect multiple authentication layers into a common account structure, which is just way cool. And I'd like to figure out how to do that. Let's look at what some of the other folks do with their header bars or with their top areas of their site. So Recode is part of Vox. They've got a big amount of room left to talk about how they need your contribution as a paid subscriber. In our case, we will need a fair amount of real estate to educate people on how Giving Forward works, how the fact that the more they read, the more money they generate for their causes, how that's super important. And in the case of where there's an ad blocker in place, we may want to dynamically ask people in the same area to turn their ad blockers off so that their nonprofits that they pick can actually benefit. In the regular Vox site, also same thing, similar banner. I like the fact that it's two-tone color because it, rather than a black bar which sort of fades into the distance and doesn't get any attention at all, yellow is a big color. The color we used for the color we choose to use for ours, we can discuss that, more of a design issue. BuzzFeed, they've got a sign-in button. I'm not a member of BuzzFeed, but I could become one. My guess is on BuzzFeed, potentially they're using a lot of the same choices, right? So again, Facebook, Google, in this case, Apple instead of Amazon. The reason it was Amazon on Washington Post is Washington Post is owned by Bezos, and Bezos owns Amazon. So they're obviously going to use the Amazon authentication. Apple, I don't know how many people, clearly BuzzFeed thinks Apple is important enough to potentially have a sign-in with Apple option. I don't know what that gets you from a registration or authentication basis, but there's still the good old email and password option as well. So basically, we have to sort of think about breaking down our WordPress into some elements and components that can run off of something within iframes or a completely different tech stack. But our header bar can be built in whatever we want, right? We don't. That doesn't need to be running necessarily within WordPress. That can be an include or an iframe, or there's lots of other ways we can power that top bar to be running how we want. And that top bar is going to be critically important. It potentially is going to communicate your logged in status, your cause, whether you're logged in or not, because if you're not logged in, your cause is whatever the UTM was that was passed into the landing page when you got there, right? It could show the cause that was selected by the writer. It could show your daily points and your overall point totals, potentially all within that top bar. Whether we also want to create a mini dashboard when you click on your avatar as well. If we can, we may need that because on tablet and in particular on mobile, we may not be able to fit much into the top bar at all, but on desktop, we have a fair amount of screen real estate that we can play with regards to what goes into the top bar. And we can change its color, we can tweak it a little bit, but the real key is going to be that in the beginning, 100% of the visitors are not going to know what we're about, right? So we're going to need that top bar to explain how Giving Forward works. And in the case of where they've got ad blockers on, ask them to whitelist us so that we can actually monetize their eyeballs on behalf of their favorite cause, or at least on behalf of the causes that the writers have chosen. If they register, then obviously they get to pick their cause. In the specifications, I've got the fact that if someone arrives with no UTM, right, we just go ahead and the reader's choice gets set to the Giving Forward General Fund. Right? The Giving Forward General Fund is different than just the 50% of the ad revenue we keep for ourselves. The General Fund is money we've already promised to allocate to causes, but the reader didn't pick one yet, right? And so we're going to allocate those points into our General Fund. That General Fund we'll use for a variety of purposes, but we'll definitely be writing those checks to nonprofits. It'll give us a lot of flexibility with regards to if there's something going on in the world that we feel needs some additional attention or needs some additional support. COVID, for example, right? We in the beginning, we'll probably be allocating a bunch of the unallocated revenue to COVID-related causes. Let's hope that that's behind us by the time we're really up and ramped up. But we'll probably always have a significant portion of the readership who hasn't selected a cause, and so they'll end up in that general bucket. So again, in review, we'll need a good top bar that acts as sort of a mini dashboard, maybe an additional mini dashboard when you click on the avatar to look at your logged in status. We'll need a way to include in the writer's choice of cause so that it's visible here and pulled into the top bar as well. If the user currently has their cookie set to a reader's choice cause, either as a result of the landing page URL having a UTM parameter or as a result of their registration, when they click a sharing behavior, I want to take that information, their current selected cause, and I want to have it go along as a UTM parameter in the sharing behavior. If they're a member and they have a member ID, I want that member ID also to go along with the sharing behavior, because that'll allow our future dashboards to show some really cool stuff. For example, if you share this and then your mom, your cousin, and 6 of your friends all read it, and your choice was the ASPCA, and my choice was Save the Children as the author, right? The ASPCA is going to go along with your click URL, and they're all going to come in and have their ASPCA settings as the reader's choice, and I'll, of course, as the writer, get my points as well, right? So it gives a great incentive for social sharing when, by social sharing, your cause goes along for the ride. Having your member ID in there is great because eventually our dashboard will be able to show the second order impact of your sharing behavior, which is way cool. Even though you didn't generate those points directly, you indirectly generated those points. It was the eyeballs of your social graph that generated the points, but it was as a result of your behavior that those points got generated. So hopefully this is clear enough so that we can slice and dice this up into little pieces and give everybody elements of something to work on. Of course, we just looked at it really from the point of view of the user, but you can sort of imagine as we're building our internal dashboards how we might want a dashboard where we can look at, total daily or monthly or weekly points by cause name, right? And so that cause name is accumulating points 2 ways. It's accumulating points as a result of the writer's choices or the reader's choices. For simplicity, I think of the writers as having a member ID, and I think of the readers as having a member ID.